Clash of the Rams, the sports talk show. I'm your host, Jeremy Hayes, and with me we have Davison Perez.
What's going on?
And Mike McMahon's back.
Good to be back, guys. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you back, man.
Good semester?
Yeah, debatable.
Being honest. All right, we're going to lead off right away with the NFL. A lot going on right now. We got the wild card race going on. It's really close, honestly, between the AFC and the NFC. It's pretty up in the air. But let's start with the AFC. Who do you think right now is going to be the team that'll clinch it in a couple of weeks?
Okay, well, right now, judging off what I see right now, and if the Kansas City Chiefs can keep up, can go back to the play that they were exhibiting in the beginning of the season, I think that they're a lock for that first wild card spot. But I have to give it to the Dolphins, just based on schedule. For me, it was between the Ravens and the Dolphins, since they're both 6-6. But when I looked at the schedules, you have the Ravens who are facing, they're facing the Lions, the Vikings, the Lions, the Patriots, and the Bengals, which is a pretty hard schedule to overcome. And the Dolphins, their last two games against the Jets and the Bills. So I see them taking it out in the ending of the season.
All right.
Definitely agree with you with the Chiefs. I definitely don't think that there's a team in the league that could catch up to the Chiefs to pass them for that first wild card spot. With the second one, though, I'm actually sticking with my preseason pick of the Ravens, just because I think that them being there and Joe Flacco having the experience of playing in big games, whereas the Dolphins, they don't really have anybody on their roster. They don't have a big step-up player that they can go to. And I don't really see them as a threat. I don't think, any team goes into Miami or any team has Miami coming into town and they're like, oh, the Dolphins are coming into town. We got to watch out. Whereas, the Ravens, you're going to have a tough game every time in, no matter who they're playing. They play a good game.
It's a matter of who you think is going to blow it more. If you tell me the Ravens or Dolphins, of course I'm going to say the Dolphins would blow more games than the Ravens. I just trust the Ravens more.
It's just if you ask me, like, from my personal opinion, I trust Tannehill more than I trust Flacco. Just based on what I've seen for this season.
Okay, that's fair.
Tannehill has shown tremendous growth, and he has talent around him with Mike Wallace and the other wide receivers that he has on his core. Yeah. Flacco just hasn't been getting it done for me this season.
To be honest, I would take the Chargers before I took the Dolphins, to be honest. The Chargers are at 5-7, but, Phillip Rivers, and they played a good game against the Chiefs. And, they showed that they could score. Danny Woodhead's been a good asset there for them. And I look at the Chargers, and I'm more scared of the Chargers offense than I am of any piece of the Dolphins. The Dolphins are just a team that I'm not very threatened by if I'm another NFL team. You look at the Chargers and then the Ravens, you see that there are definite, targets that they have. They have go-to guys, go-to players. Phillip Rivers can have a big game. Joe Flacco can have a big game. Torrey Smith can have a big game. There's key players on both those teams that I think can help carry this team into a playoff run.
The only thing about the Chargers is that their division is so up in the air now, with the Kansas City Chiefs doing so well. So that's the only reason why I wouldn't pick the Chargers. Otherwise, I would be right with you. I'd pick the Chargers because I obviously think the Chargers are better than the Dolphins. It's just that the division and their division is what's really beating them right now.
And moving on to that, kind of compare them to the Cardinals. We're like, oh, they have a shot at the playoffs. But when you have two teams that are pretty stacked, it's going to be hard to make it. So moving into that, who's your NFC wildcards?
Well, right now for me, it's Carolina. Carolina's a definite lock, battling for that the division lead and the wild card with the New Orleans Saints. We'll see how that shapes up.
Whichever one wins.
Yeah, they faced the Saints twice in the last 4 games of the season, so we'll see how things shake up there. But on the flip side to that, I gotta go. I had to think about it. But I gotta go with the 49ers. I think that they're gonna end up, taking it.
Yeah, getting enough at the end.
I think they're gonna do enough to take that spot.
Yeah. I'm going to stick with my preseason picks as well. I had Carolina in there. Cam Newton's been really impressive. I definitely think they have staying power in the NFC for the rest of the season. Yeah. For the second spot, 2 weeks ago I probably would have taken the Cardinals because I thought that they had a very dynamic, interesting offense. They play good defense. But the injury to Andre Ellington, I really think is a bigger deal than a lot of people are making out to be. Because he's been a valuable asset for them, a guy who can come in, play multiple positions and, get involved in the pass game as well as, running the Wildcat and stuff like that. So I think losing him in the backfield might be the thing that kind of breaks the camel's back and pushes the 49ers into it, especially because the Cardinals have to play both the 49ers and the Seahawks.
And
Definitely.
as far as that with Ellington, that's putting a lot on Carson Palmer. We've all seen Carson Palmer play. He isn't the type of quarterback that can give that extra push. And now nobody mentioned, I'm surprised, I wanted to bring it up. The 49ers are definitely kind of my favorite, but the Eagles, Nick Foles been
That's
playing
true.
lights out for the
Yeah.
last couple of weeks.
I was
mean,
actually just going to mention that this conference is up in the air right now. You have the Philadelphia Eagles competing with the Dallas Cowboys. You have, obviously, we said the 49ers, but just to go back to the Eagles they have a legitimate shot, but I don't know how long this Nick Foles train is gonna last, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. I definitely could see, if Nick Foles comes in, because I know the big thing is touchdown streak without an interception. So what's going to happen if Nick Foles comes in and throws 3 interceptions in a game? I really feel like it could be a crash and burn situation. I really think that the Eagles are a crash and burn type team.
Mm-hmm.
They're riding the high line right now. They're doing really great. They're on a run. But what's going to happen? How are they going to bounce back if they lose? And I really feel like that the Eagles don't have the staying power. To be honest, I would almost pick the Giants over I would the Eagles. It's as unlikely as it is. That's how unlikely I think the Eagles making the playoff is. Because, I really just don't think that the Eagles have that winning attitude yet. I don't think that they're ready to make the playoffs.
well, I just got to throw this out there, too, and it's a realistic possibility. What if the Eagles, Cardinals, Giants, what if none of them have that extra thing to push them through? I feel like that's what it's coming down to, is that it's all teams that don't really have that extra push, like how we were arguing like with the Ravens, like how they have that little extra to go make it into the playoffs and actually contend. I feel like none of these teams really have that extra push that they're looking for. Maybe they'll find it within the next couple of weeks.
That's the biggest thing within this conference. It's been this way all season. All four of these teams have been supremely inconsistent.
Yeah.
They don't get the job done. They're unable to put together a constant string of wins. And yeah, let's say Dallas makes the playoffs, but they're gonna get bounced out in the first round just because they're none of these teams, none of the 4 teams are strong enough to kind of get past the first round.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And the fact of the matter in the NFC is you look at where the Giants were like 8 weeks ago, and you're like, now they're in the playoff run. It's even though they're a long shot, they're not out of it.
There's a possibility.
There's plenty of time. There's definitely a couple scenarios where the Giants could sneak in, and I emphasize the word sneak in because that's what it would be.
Yeah.
But it's still that close of a race in the NFC.
And nobody's talked, we haven't mentioned this yet, nobody's clinch. You usually get that one team in the NFL. It's because there are so many divisions like the Seahawks and the Broncos where they have a lot of competition in that number 2 spot. That's hard for them to even clinch their division, never mind the playoffs. So, that's pretty interesting. We actually have to move on now from the NFL. But, we covered AFC and NFC, so we're going to have to wait and see what actually happens in the next couple of weeks. But moving on to college football for once. First time on Clash of the Rams this year, we're talking about college football. Very interesting weekend. Probably one of the greatest college football games, even finishes to a college football game ever. So with that being said, Alabama falls to number 4. Number 3 is Auburn. Number 2, Ohio State. And number 1, FSU. Between those 4 teams, if we fast forward into next year, would have a playoff between those 4 teams. It would be great. But what do you think is going to be the ending result as far as the championship game?
For championship game, I'm honestly gonna have to go with how the standings are currently right now, FSU and Ohio State.
Yeah.
Just because I love the work that Urban Meyer has done with his team in Ohio State. They've been having a phenomenal year. And FSU, they have Jameis Winston, and they're kind of on a roll right now. It's kind of hard to stop a team when, they face Duke, which is definitely a formidable team. They're also undefeated this season. But at the end of the day, I think that when a team is on a hot start like that, it's kind of hard to put them out on the last game of the season. And I can foresee that matchup.
Honestly, even though they're having a good season, I think it would be like the biggest upset if Duke actually won against FSU.
That would be a pretty big upset for sure.
Well, a lot of it depends on the conference championship games, like you guys just said. If Ohio State comes out against Michigan State in the Big Ten championship, it doesn't look so hot, and Auburn, dominates the SEC title game, there's a very good possibility that Auburn can jump over Ohio State, even if Ohio State wins by a hair. So it really depends on the performances. Me personally, I think that the two best teams in the country are Auburn and Florida State. And you know what? I still almost think that Alabama might be a little bit better than Auburn, but obviously Auburn beat them.
Yeah.
Because of bad coaching, in my personal opinion. I think Saban
Definitely.
blew that game against Auburn. And I hope you guys turn your clocks back 1 second for daylight Saban time. But Auburn really they just outcoached. Alabama got outcoached by Auburn. You saw that decision to have nobody out there in the field goal unit that can tackle. You saw, if you look at the replay, guys are just totally clueless out there. It looks like Pee Wee football. It's really disgusting for the #1 program in the country. And also on top of that is how the best team in college football the last 4 years not have a kicker. How do you not have a guy that you can go to? It's the reason why they lost to Alabama 2 years ago. How do they not have a guy that can go out there and kick a 30-yard field goal on 4th and 1? Why do they have to go for it? So really this shouldn't even be a debate because Alabama should still be undefeated. But Auburn really impressed me, and I really think that they deserve a chance to play in the title game.
I gotta cut you off. No Ohio State?
No, you know what? I really, if you compare the SEC to the Big Ten, I really just think the SEC is so superior to the Big Ten. They play a superior type of football. And you look at Ohio State. Ohio State went down to the wire with Michigan, and I know it's a rivalry game, but Michigan almost lost to the University of Connecticut. A team that only has 2 wins on the year in the American Conference, which is a lowly conference.
I feel like this is the problem that we've been talking about with the BCS, though. So there is the very likely potential we're going to have a team that's undefeated once again. Well, last year they were banned, but I mean, not make the BCS if they have a close game against Michigan State, which I mean, it just shows that we need some kind of playoff system to show, okay, yeah, the Big Ten isn't that good. Because I mean, if you think of it that way, why even play? It gets to the point where why even just have the SEC teams always make the championships.
You're right, but a lot of the times it comes down to one-loss teams. That's what it comes down to most of the time. There's rarely an occasion where there are multiple undefeated teams. And you look at Missouri; they're 5th right now with 1 loss in the SEC. They're just as qualified to be in the hunt as Alabama is, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. Missouri, they actually surprised me in the fact that they're actually number 5 right now. They started the season, they started the season pretty low on the rankings, and they kind of worked their way up. So that is definitely very admirable of them. But I'm sticking to my guns. I think Ohio State, Urban Meyer really impressed me. That brawl is nonsense, and there's questions as to why he's allowing those guys that were involved to still play, even though they were ejected. I think that they shouldn't be allowed to play, but I think FSU and Ohio State for me, just because of what Urban Meyer has done with this team and where he's brought them.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree with that. I definitely think Braxton Miller and Carlos Hyde is one of the best 1-2 punches in college football. I just, going off the emotion of Auburn's big win against Alabama, wouldn't it just be nice to be able to see them play for a national title after everything that's happened, the game versus Georgia, the Iron Bowl, and then depending on what happens in the conference title, it's just like they're almost like the Cinderella this year where you want to see them get a shot at the title game. You want to see them go up against FSU, or maybe it might end up being Ohio State and Auburn. We never know. But you want to see them get a shot. Yeah.
Sure. And it's all going to be up to a bunch of old guys in a room that are going to vote for who's going to be in the BCS instead of just seeing these 4 teams play it out. But I mean, real quick, we only have a little bit of time left, but let's go into the Heisman. Yeah. It's a pretty interesting race this year. There isn't a clear front runner, but who do you think is going to be like the king of kings, as our producer would say, as far as the Heisman?
Okay, well, you have 3 guys right now in the front running, according to ESPN. You have Jameis Winston, you have Andre Williams of BC, and you have A.J. McCarron. Judging off of A.J. McCarron's loss to Auburn, I don't want to slight him. Here's my projection. My projections would be Andre Williams, A.J. McCarron, and then Jameis Winston.
So Williams first.
Williams first, and I'm going to tell you why. Andre Williams, to me, has had a phenomenal year. Nobody saw him coming. He's a senior, so he's been on the team for 4 years, and nobody knew his name until this year. The fact that he came out and he ran for 2,107 yards, to be exact, is unbelievable. He's leading the league by a lot, by like 400 yards. And just when you look at the tape on this guy and you see how he just knocks guys over like it's nothing, like they're just,
Yeah.
like they're pins in his game of chess or whatever. That is impressive. That is really impressive to me, and you got to give it to him. He stands for what the mission statement of the Heisman is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 2 weeks ago I would have been with you, but his game, I mean, he left the Syracuse game with injury, and now he's not playing in the conference title game, which hurts him a little bit. And then the beauty of the Heisman, I love the Heisman, because it looks in the character of the player, and I love that, because, there are too many awards where, they go to guys who are borderline criminal, and I really don't think that the committee could give it to Winston. I don't think it can happen.
I was about to say, that's what you're leading to.
Yeah,
Winston.
and so then it comes down to McCarron and Williams, and if Williams didn't go down against Syracuse, I really think he had it in the bag. Now I don't want to take anything away from McCarron because he lost, just because Alabama lost, because he put his team in a position to win that football game. He had the 99-yard touchdown pass, and Alabama was right there to win it. If it didn't come down to a completely useless field goal unit, they would have had a shot to win the football game.
That's not the only thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but the whole thing with A.J. McCarron, he didn't really put his team in a position to win. And granted, it might be because of coaching and what Nick Saban did, but the fact that he was put in that situation and he wasn't able to execute kind of does slight him a bit. They wouldn't have needed to take that field goal if he would have executed on that 3rd and 1. So there's a lot of intangible things
There's a lot of factors that go into all
and
that.
I don't want to slight Andre Williams just because of his injury, because he had a phenomenal year. He went against that game he had against Army, running for 295 yards against North Carolina with the record-breaking game that he ran. That's just crazy to me. How with like 50 seconds on the clock, it's in the 4th quarter, the game's over already, and you still ran past for 40 yards for another touchdown. That's incredible.
The only thing I worry about is the committee might shy away from voting for a guy from a non-elite school, like BC, and then
that's not a contender.
You also have the Northern Illinois situation where they have a guy that's in the contention, but it's a smaller school. Can you really take that into consideration? My sleeper though is Trey Mason from Auburn, the running back. He's a guy where if he comes out and he puts up a huge conference title game, the way the Heisman's been, where it's been so many contenders and so many ups and downs, it might just be the guy who made the final last push towards it that gets it. Because really, there's been no front runner. There hasn't been.
I really feel like it would have to be like a record-breaking game for him to, because he's not even in talks.
No,
right
he
now
hasn't even
for it.
been in the
That's
talks.
why
But it's just been because the
Bold
Heisman's been
prediction,
so
though,
bizarre. It's been so bizarre.
Yeah.
Where I would almost even consider bringing Teddy Bridgewater back into the discussion because so many names have cycled through.
Yeah.
Where it's such a watered down roster now that you're looking at for the Heisman, and it's so weird for an award for the Heisman where we don't really know who's going to win. There's really no prediction to make.
Yeah. All right. Well, we gotta move on, but let's just remember that a lot of people at the beginning of the year said Clowney might be the first defensive player to ever win the Heisman.
What's that guy doing? I thought he was on the bench, right?
Yeah, he's probably getting some air right now. But yeah. So we're gonna finish up the show with you guys doing your Ramrants. So Mike, I'm actually gonna let you start if you want to start it off.
All
About
right.
a minute 30. Go.
That's fine. I'm going to start off talking about a little Baseball Hall of Fame stuff. I know we got into a lot of it last year.
A lot of it, yeah.
A lot of my opinions haven't changed. But the thing I want to look at is when they vote for the Hall of Fame, it's really about who was the most dominant in their era. And last year I made a big push for Craig Biggio, and I've thought about it, and I'm going to take it back, because Craig Biggio wasn't a guy that you feared in a lineup. Guys like Frank Thomas, when Frank Thomas was coming up to the plate, you were scared. Frank Thomas could change a game with one swing of the bat. He was a difference maker in baseball games, and I think that's what pushes him over the hump for the Hall of Fame. Guys like Greg Maddux. These are guys, when you were facing Greg Maddux, you were already behind. You had to make up ground from the start. So it's that little character in a player where they were dominant in their era that pushes them over the hump for Hall of Fame. Guys, like Craig Biggio and, guys that have, the decent stats because they played for a long time, I don't really see them as elite, You put them in a Hall of Fame with, you got Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, do you really think Craig Biggio's like Hank Aaron? No. I mean, you don't really see it that way. Tom Glavine, would you compare Tom Glavine to Tom Seaver? No, absolutely not, So you really need to narrow it down and think about who was the most dominant and who made the biggest impact on their era when you're voting for the Hall of Fame.
All right. Well, I'm gonna go before you. Gonna talk about Jason Kidd, one of the most overrated point guards in NBA history, who went to become a coach after retiring. In his debut season, he decides that he's gonna do the old cup spill trick, which I mean has actually been done before, surprisingly, but nobody has ever been fined for it, and he was actually fined a handsome amount for it. So I'm just not going into too much detail with it, but just the Brooklyn Nets all together this year. With everybody like trashes the Celtics about the trade and how Danny Ainge, like they need to kick him out and everything. It's a blessing really for Celtics fans that they got Pierce and Garnett's contracts out of there. Even Terry's, I always forget about Terry's, and they sent him to a team that where okay, it's not gonna work out, it's not gonna mix well. This isn't a situation like the Heat where you have dominant guys that aren't clicking right away. That's not what it is. You have aging guys that aren't doing that well, and they're coming to the end. So I mean, just the whole stunt with Kidd, like having Kidd be the head coach, just have Kidd be the coach, and having just the older guys on the roster when they had Joe Johnson and Williams. They need to go another route than trading for these bigger names.
For sure. I'm going to talk about some college ball. First, let me start off with Andrew Wiggins. Talking about Andre Williams
so
Can't
much.
even get the names right. Andrew Wiggins. He's off to a slow start this season. Kansas. Everybody knows Kansas is a front runner in this league with Wayne Selden that they have and Joel Embiid and things like that. But Andrew Wiggins, he's gonna get it right. He's gonna get it together. Over on the flip side in Kentucky, you have
Julius Randle.
Yeah, Julius Randle. Sorry,
no problem.
So you have Julius Randle. He's a man child. He's got 13 boards right now, and he's really doing impressive things out there in Kentucky. And then finally you have Duke with Jabari Parker. He's having a phenomenal season, even though they couldn't get it done against Villanova. Great season so far. And finally, I just wanted to talk about Oklahoma State and how Marcus Smart is off to a great season despite that loss against Memphis. He's averaging 21 points as a starting guard for that team, and I'm really high on Oklahoma State. I think they have a great balance of veteran and young talent. I think Phil Forte coming off the bench is phenomenal. He had 19 points against Memphis this past game. I think that team is really poised to give those teams like Kentucky and Duke and Kansas a run for their money. Everybody's so high on them, but they're very young, and I don't think that they'll be able to get it done in this first season.
All right. Just the whole college basketball season's way more exciting than the past 5 years. So I mean, it's a lot of fun to watch. But yeah, that's about it, guys. Last episode of the semester. So we're not going to see you guys until 2014 from us at Studio 73. We'll see you then.